Hey guys, Brian Dean from SEMrush here. I saw an industry study the other day that blew my mind. 56% of consumers are now using AI tools like ChatGPT to compare products and decide what to buy. And here's the crazy part. These AI tools don't show 10 options like Google does. Instead, they only recommend a handful of products. The question is, how can you get your brand recommended in AI tools? Well, that's exactly what I'm gonna show you today, step by step. But before we get into the steps, there's one very important thing you need to understand about how AI search actually works. Because if you don't understand this one thing, the tactics that I'm about to show you won't make sense. When someone asks ChatGPT something like, what's the best skincare brand for sensitive skin? The AI isn't pulling from one source like Google does. It's pulling from patterns. Specifically, it's looking at what shows up consistently across the web. Things like best of lists, forums, blog content, product reviews, and more. If the same brand keeps showing up across those different sources, AI tools like ChatGPT and Gemini will see it as relevant to that product category. And once that happens, it's much more likely to include that brand in AI answers. Let me show you how this works with a real life example, Keychron. These guys are doing a great job with their AI SEO. Whenever you do a search for mechanical keyboards in an LLM, they're likely to show up as a recommended brand. Why? Well, I did some digging and I discovered that review sites like PC Mag and Tom's Guide rank Keychron in their top recommendations over and over again. Plus, Keychron's Amazon pages are detailed with positive reviews and an average rating of 4.4 stars. And there are multiple Reddit threads in different subreddits that recommend the brand, plus several YouTube videos feature Keychron in their roundup of mechanical keyboards. And AI tools are seeing the same brand being mentioned over and over again in different places, in the same context. So when someone asks for recommendations like, what's the best mechanical keyboard to buy, Keychron is gonna get mentioned most of the time. On the flip side, if your product only lives on your website and nowhere else, there's no pattern for these AI tools to draw from, which means that the AI tool won't be confident enough to recommend you. And this is the big shift a lot of people are missing when it comes to AI SEO. With traditional SEO, you could rank by building a page and building links to it. With AI search, visibility comes from being mentioned across the web in different places in the same context. With that out of the way, let's dive into our first step. Show up in product discussions. Product discussions are one of the main places that ChatGPT pulls from when it decides which brand to mention in an answer. Here's why. When someone reads a list or watches a video that mentions a product, they usually want someone's real life opinion before making that purchase. So they go to places like Reddit, Quora, and industry forums, and they search for things like best hypoallergenic anti-wrinkle cream, is this brand worth it, or alternatives to X. And these threads are important for one main reason. They include real people's opinions, which is why ChatGPT often summarizes these discussions when giving an answer. So if your product shows up consistently in these discussions, an AI tool is much more likely to recommend and feature your brand. Here's exactly how to approach it to get more of these mentions. First, you want to find the right conversations. Search for things like your product name, your category plus best, or your category plus Reddit, or your category plus reviews. And you'll quickly find threads where people are discussing and comparing different options. Next, you want to participate in those discussions. If your product is a good fit, mention it. If it's not the best option for that situation, say that too. That kind of honesty and transparency really stands out, especially in places like Reddit. Now, I have no idea if this is the brand or just some random person posting, which is kind of the point. Another important thing to keep in mind as you do this is consistency. Specifically, you want to pay attention to how your product is described. Now, you don't need to use the same exact wording every single time, obviously, but the way you explain what the product does, who it's for, and when it works best should be similar across the different threads. And over time, these descriptions get ingrained into ChatGPT's training, which leads us to step number 2, get into best product lists. If you're like me, you've seen lots of these best product lists before. If not, here's an example. If your product isn't on any of these lists, you're missing out on a huge part of the decision-making process, with or without AI. But for this video, we're focusing on how to get your brand to rank in AI tools. So we're gonna show you exactly how to approach that. First, your goal is to find the right lists. You probably wanna skip broad lists like best skincare products. They're too broad for this strategy, especially if you're a small brand trying to stand out. So you want to focus on specific problems that your product solves instead. I'm talking about things like best moisturizer for sensitive skin, best anti-aging serum for dry skin, and best skincare brands for acne. Here's an example. These are the types of searches people use when they're close to buying a specific product. And they're the exact types of pages that AI tools tend to train on. And once you find a few of these solid lists, it's time for outreach. Now let's be super realistic for a second. Most publishers aren't gonna update their lists just because you ask nicely. You need to give them a reason. A simple way to do that is offering them a free product. Now, if you run an e-commerce brand, which you probably are if you're watching this video, that might be something like sending them a free sample, offering a full-size product to try, or putting together a small bundle of products so they can get a real feel for what you do. The key is to get them to actually use the product, because once someone has actually tried your product, they're much more likely to write about it. And you want to make your outreach super short. Here's an example. I get pitches like this asking to add products to my list posts all the time, and I automatically delete most of them because they're like 1,000 words of fluff and nonsense. Instead, just explain what your product does, who it's for, why it would fit into that specific list, and show them that you're offering a free product or sample. And if you are able to influence the text that goes around your brand mention, make sure to maximize it. For example, instead of something generic like this is a high quality moisturizer, say it's designed specifically for people with sensitive skin who react to artificial ingredients. That's the exact type of description that AI tools will use to train on your brand and understand who it's for and what it does. Which leads us to step number 3, create comparison pages on your own website. When someone asks ChatGPT something like, what's the best supplement to boost recovery after a hard workout, the model isn't guessing what to recommend. It's pulling from content that already answers that exact question. And if your site doesn't have a page that connects that use case to your product, you're missing out on a chance to show up. That's where comparison pages come in. Most e-commerce sites focus on product pages, category pages, and some educational how-to blog content. And there's nothing wrong with these page types, but none of these pages are designed specifically for someone that's comparing and deciding between different options. And comparison pages are built for that exact thing. These are pages designed for someone that already knows what they want. They're just deciding which brand to go for. So instead of searching for a how-to keyword like how to enhance recovery after a 2-hour workout, they're searching for things like best supplements to increase overnight HRV, alternatives to AG1, and Thorne versus Pure encapsulations. So if you want to show up in those AI answers, you need content that answers that exact type of query. Here's a real life example. As you can see, this is a comparison page that ranks alternatives to athletic greens. The important thing to point out is that this is a page that's actually published by a competitor to athletic greens, Groons. And this page is sort of a win-win when it comes to AI SEO for that brand. First, when someone asks ChatGPT about alternatives, they have a decent chance of showing up. Second, when the brand is mentioned, ChatGPT can also link to this comparison page as a source. So yeah, that's the goal of this step. Create pages that help people decide what to buy and seamlessly include your product as an option, which leads us to step number 4, get mentions across the web. I mentioned this earlier in the video, but it's worth repeating. If you want ChatGPT to consistently recommend your product and your brand, you need mention across as many different sources as possible. For example, review platforms are where people go to see if a product actually works. I'm talking about things like Amazon reviews, Trustpilot, and Yotpo widgets on Shopify stores. Blog posts and affiliate articles break down use cases, pros and cons, and pricing. And YouTube is where people go to see the product being used in real life. And when your product shows up across all these different places, something interesting happens. People from several different sources and different walks of life are describing your product and what it does. They mention some of the same use cases. And hey, they probably mentioned some weaknesses too, or things they didn't like, which is totally fine. The important thing is consistency, because when ChatGPT sees your product mentioned across multiple sources, it becomes super confident to include you in its answers. On the other hand, if your product only shows up in 1 or 2 different places, or it's not consistent, ChatGPT and other AI tools aren't going to be confident enough to recommend your brand. In terms of practical steps, this means taking some of your marketing effort and putting it into things like getting more reviews, working with creators on YouTube, appearing in more blog comparison pages, or just partnering with affiliates in your niche. How about a real life example? The cookware brand Caraway is crushing it with AI SEO right now. When you ask AI about the best bakeware sets or the best ceramic pans, Caraway almost always shows up towards the top of the list. Their secret? Showing up in the exact places that LLMs train on. For example, here's a detailed review from a food blog, a bunch of discussions on forums, reviews and product info on third-party e-com platforms like Amazon, and a strong affiliate program that incentivizes cooking influencers to promote the brand. Which is why SEMrush's AI SEO toolkit shows that Caraway is outperforming its competitors in terms of visibility in AI tools like ChatGPT and Gemini. So yeah, that's how to get your e-commerce brand to show up more often in AI tools like ChatGPT. And now I'd like to hear from you. What are you doing to get your brand to show up in ChatGPT? Let me know in the comment section below.